Hello again. It's Mrs. Murphy and Mr. Butler signing back in with chapter 3 of Mice and Men. And we're going to do a quick summary here for you. Basically, our guys have reached the ranch and they have the job. They are in the bunkhouse. They have met Candy, the old swamper with the old dog. He's a handyman around the ranch. And then they have met Curly, which is the boss's son. He seems to be not a very friendly person, likes to pick fights with bigger guys, and due to Lenny's size, automatically has his eyes set on Lenny in terms of wanting to cause problems. Now, Lenny might be a giant, but he is what I would consider a gentle giant. He does not want to fight. He doesn't like the feelings and emotions that he's getting from the ranch. He just kind of wants to leave. But again, era. It's the Great Depression. They have no money. They have to have a job. They can't travel anywhere without any money. So they're going to try and stay for a while and see what's going on. They've met Slim. He is kind of the foreman of the crew. Slim's a great guy, and they appreciate him being kind. So, without further ado, although there was an evening brightness showing through the window of the bunkhouse, inside it was dusk. Through the open door came the thuds and occasional clangs of a horseshoe game, and now and then the sound of voices raised in approval or derision. Slim and George came into the darkening bunkhouse together. Slim reached up over the card table and turned on the tin-shaded electric light. Instantly, the table was brilliant with light, and the cone of shade threw its brightness straight forward, leaving the corners of the bunkhouse still in dusk. Slim sat down on a box, and George took his place opposite. "It wasn't nothing," said Slim. "I would have had to drown most of 'em anyways. No need to thank me about that." George said, "It wasn't much to you, maybe, but it was a hell of a lot to him. Jesus Christ. I don't know how we're going to get him to sleep in here. He'll want to sleep right out there in the barn with him. We'll have trouble keeping him from getting right in the box with them pups." "It wasn't nothing," Slim repeated. "Say, you sure was right about him. Maybe he ain't bright, but I ain't never seen such a worker. He damn near killed his partner, Buckin' Barley. There ain't nobody can keep up with him. God almighty, I'd never seen such a strong guy." George spoke proudly. "Just tell Lenny what to do, and he'll do it if it don't take no figuring. He can't think of nothing to do himself, but he sure can take orders." There was a clang of a horseshoe on the iron stake outside and a little cheer of voices. Slim moved back slightly so the light was not on his face. "Funny how you and him string along together." It was Slim's calm invitation to confidence. "What's funny about it?" George demanded defensively. "Oh, I don't know. Hardly none of the guys ever travel together. I hardly never seen two guys travel together. You know how the hands are. They just come in and get their bunk and work a month, and then they quit and go out on alone. Never seen to give a damn about nobody. It's just kind of funny, a cuckoo like him and a smart guy like you traveling together." "Oh, he ain't no cuckoo," said George. "He's dumb as hell, but he ain't crazy. And I ain't so bright neither, nor I wouldn't be bucking barley for my 50 and found. If I was bright, if I was even a little bit smart, I'd have my own place, and I'd be bringing in my own crops, instead of doing all the work and not getting what comes up out of the ground." George fell silent. He wanted to talk. Slim neither encouraged nor discouraged him. He just sat back quiet and receptive. "It ain't so funny, him and me going round together," George said at last. "Him and me was both born in Auburn. I know his Aunt Clara. She took him when he was a baby and raised him up. When his Aunt Clara died, Lenny just come along with me out working. Got kind of used to each other after a while." Said Slim. George looked over at Slim and saw the calm, godlike eyes fastened on him. "Funny," said George. "I used to have a hell of a lot of fun with him. Used to play jokes on him because he was too dumb to take care of himself. But he was too dumb to even know he had a joke played on him. I had fun. Made me seem goddamn smart alongside of him. Why, he'd do any damn thing I told him. If I told him to walk over a cliff, over he'd go. That wasn't so damn much fun after a while. He never got mad about it neither. I beat the hell out of him, and he could have bust every bone in my body with just his hands, but he never lifted a finger against me." George's voice was taking on the tone of a confession. "Tell you what made me stop that. One day a bunch of guys was standing around up on the Sacramento River. I was feeling pretty smart. I turns to Lenny and says, 'Jump in.' And he jumps. Couldn't swim a stroke. He damn near drowned before we could get him. And he was so damn nice to me for pulling him out. Clean forgot I told him to jump in. Well, I ain't done nothing like that no more." "He's a nice fellow," said Slim. Guy don't need no sense to be a nice feller. Seems to me it just works the other way around. Take a real smart guy, and he ain't hardly ever a nice fella.
George stacked the George stacked the scattered cards and began to lay out his solitaire hand. The shoes thudded on the ground outside, and the light of the evening still made the windows squares bright. I ain't got no people, George said. I seen the guys that go around on the ranges alone. That ain't no good. They don't have no fun. After a long time, they get mean. They get wanting to fight all the time. Yeah, they get mean, Slim agreed. They get so they don't want to talk to nobody. Of course, Lynn is a goddamn nuisance most of the time, said George, but you get used to going around with a guy and can't get rid of him. He ain't mean, said Slim. I can see Lenny ain't a bit mean. Of course he ain't mean, but he gets in trouble all the time because he's so goddamn dumb. Like what happened in Weed. He stopped in the middle of turning over a cart. He looked alarmed and peered over at Slim. You wouldn't tell nobody? What do you do in Weed? Slim asked calmly. You wouldn't tell. No, of course you wouldn't. What do you do in Weed? Slim asked again. Well, you seen this girl in a red dress, dumb bastard like he is. He wants to touch everything he likes. Just wants to feel it. So he reaches out to feel his red dress, and the girl lets out a squawk. And that gets Lenny all mixed up, and he holds on because that's the only thing he can think about. Well, the girl squawks and squawks. I was just a little bit off, and I heard all the yellings. So I come running. And by that time, Lenny's so scared, all he can think to do is just hold on. I socked him over the head with a fence picket to make him let go. He was so scared he couldn't let go of that dress, and he's so goddamn strong, you know. Slim's eyes were level and unwinking. He nodded very slowly. So what happens? George carefully built his line of solitaire cards. Well, the girls, rabbits, and tells the law she'd been raped. The guys and we started a party out to lynch Lenny. So we sit in an irrigation ditch underwater all the rest of the day. Got on our heads sticking out of from the side of the ditch, and that night we scrammed out of there. Slim sat in silence for a moment. Didn't hurt the girl none, huh? He asked finally. Hell no. He's just scared. I'd be scared too if he grabbed me, but he never hurt her. He just wanted to touch that red dress like he wants to pet them pups all the time. He ain't mean, said Slim. I can tell a mean guy a mile off. Of course he ain't, and he'll do any damn thing Lenny came in through the door. He wore his blue denim coat over his shoulders like a cape, and he walked hunched way over. Hi, Lenny, said George. How do you like the pup now? Lenny said breathlessly. He's brown and white, just like I wanted. He went directly to his bunk and lay down and turned his face to the wall and drew up his knees. George put down his cards very deliberately. Lenny, he said sharply. Lenny twisted his neck and looked over his shoulder. Huh? What do you want, George? I told you couldn't bring that pup in here. What pup, George? I ain't got no pup. George went clicking to him, grabbed him by the shoulder, and rolled him over. He reached down and picked the tiny puppy from where Lenny had been concealing it against his stomach. Lenny sat up quickly. Give him to me, George, George said. You get right up and take this pup back to the nest. He's got to sleep with his mother. You want to kill him, just born last night, and you take him out of the nest. You take him back, or I'll tell Slim not to let you have him. Lenny held out his hands pleadingly. Give him to me, George. I'll take him back. I didn't mean to no harm, George. Honest, I didn't. I just wanted to pet him a little. George handed the pup to him. All right, you get him back there quick, and don't you take him out no more. You'll kill him the first thing you know. Lenny fairly scuttled out of the room.
Slim had not moved. His calm eyes followed Lenny out the door. Jesus, he said, he's just like a kid, ain't he? Sure, he's just like a kid. There ain't no more harm in him than a kid neither, except he's so strong. I bet he won't come in here to sleep tonight. He'd sleep right alongside that box in the barn. Well, let him. He ain't doing no harm out there. It was almost dark outside now. Old Candy and the Swamper came in and went to his bunk, and behind him struggled his old dog. Hello, Slim. Hello, George. Don't neither of you play horseshoes? I don't like to play every night, said Slim. Candy went on. Either of you guys got a slug of whiskey? I got a gut ache. I ain't, said Slim. I'd drink it myself if I had. And I ain't got a gut ache neither. Got a bad gut ache, said Candy. Them goddamn turnips give it to me. I knowed they was going to before I ever eat 'em. The thick-bodied Carlson came in out of the darkening yard. He walked to the other end of the bunkhouse and turned on the second shaded light. Darker'n hell in here, he said. Jesus, how that black man can pitch shoes. He's plenty good, said Slim. Damn right he is, said Carlson. He don't give nobody else a chance to win. He stopped and sniffed the air, and still sniffing, looked down at the old dog. God almighty, that dog stinks. Get him out of here, Candy. I don't know nothing that stinks as bad as an old dog. You got to get him out. Candy rolled to the edge of his bunk. He reached over and patted the ancient dog, and he apologized. I've been around him so much I never notice how he stinks. Well, I can't stand him in here, said Carlson. That stink hangs around even after he's gone. He walked over with his heavy-legged stride and looked down at the dog. Got no teeth, he said. He's all stiff with rheumatism. He ain't no good to you, Candy, and he ain't no good to himself. Why didn't you shoot him, Candy? The old man squirmed uncomfortably. Well, hell, I had him so long. I had him since he was a pup. I herded sheep with him, he said proudly. You wouldn't think it to look at him now, but he was the best damn sheepdog I ever seen. George said, I seen a guy in Weed that had an Arrendale, could herd sheep, learned it from the other dogs. Carlson was not to be put off. Look, Candy, this old dog just suffers himself all the time. If you was to take him out and shoot him right in the back of the head, he leaned over and pointed, right there, why, he'd never know what hit him. Candy looked about unhappily. No, he said softly, no, I couldn't do that. I had him too long. He don't have no fun, Carlson insisted, and he stinks to beat hell. Tell you what, I'll shoot him for you. Then it won't be you that does it. Candy threw his legs off the bunk. He scratched the white stubble whiskers on his cheek nervously. I'm so used to him, he said softly. I had him from a pup. Well, you ain't being kind to him, keeping him alive, said Carlson. Look, Slim's bitch got a litter now. I bet Slim would give you one of them pups to raise up, wouldn't you, Slim? The Skinner had been studying the old dog with his calm eyes. Yeah, he said. You can have a pup if you want to. He seemed to shake himself free for speech. Carl's right, Candy. That dog ain't no good to himself. I wish somebody'd shoot me if I got old and a cripple. Candy looked helplessly at him, for Slim's opinions were law. Maybe it hurt him, he suggested. I don't mind taking care of him. Carlson said, the way I'd shoot him, he wouldn't feel nothing. I'd put the gun right there, he pointed with his toe, right back of the head. He wouldn't even quiver. Candy looked for help from face to face. It was quite dark outside by now. A young laboring man came in. His sloping shoulders were bent forward, and he walked heavily on his heels, as though he carried the invisible grain bag. He went to his bunk and put his hat on his shelf. Then he picked up a pulp magazine from the shelf and brought it to the light of the table. Did I show you this, Slim? He asked. Show me what? The young man turned to the back of the magazine, put it right down at the table, and pointed with his finger. Right there. Read that. Slim bent over. Go on, said the young man. Read it out loud. Dear Editor, Slim read slowly. I read your mag for 6 years, and I think it's the best on the market. I like stories by Peter Rand. I think he's a wingding. Give us more like The Dark Rider. I don't write many letters. Just thought I would tell you I think your mag's the best dime's worth I ever spent. Slim looked up questioningly. What do you want me to read that for? Whit said, go on, read the name at the bottom. Slim read, Yours for Success, William Tenner. He glanced up at Whit again. What do you want me to read that for? Whit closed the magazine impressively. Don't you remember Bill Tenner worked here about 3 months ago? Slim thought, little guy. Drove a cultivator. That's him, Whit cried. That's the guy. You think he's the guy that wrote this letter? I know it. Bill and me was in here one day. Bill had one of them books that just come. He was looking in it and says, I wrote a letter. Wonder if they put it in the book. But it wasn't there. Bill says, maybe they're saving it for later, and that's just what they done. There it is. Guess you're right, said Slim. Got it right in the book. George held out his hand for the magazine. Let's look at it. Whit found the page again, and he did not surrender his hold on it. He pointed out the letter with his forefinger, and then he went to his box shelf and laid the magazine carefully in it. I wonder if Bill's seen it, he said. Bill and me worked in that patch of field peas. Run cultivators, both of us. Bill was a hell of a nice fella. During the conversation, Carlson had refused to be drawn in. He continued to look down at that old dog. Candy watched him uneasily. At last, Carlson said, if you want me to, I'll put the old devil out of his misery right now and get it over with. Ain't nothing left for him. Can't eat, can't see, can't even walk without hurting. Candy said hopefully, you ain't got no gun. The hell I ain't. Got a Luger. It wouldn't hurt him none at all. Candy said, maybe tomorrow. Let's wait till tomorrow. I don't see no reason for it, said Carlson. He went to his bunk, pulled his bag from underneath it, and took out a Luger pistol. Let's get it over with, he said. We can't sleep with them stinking around in here. He put the pistol in his hip pocket. Candy looked a long time at Slim to try and find some reversal, and Slim gave him none. At last, Candy said softly and hopelessly, all right, take him. He did not look down at the dog at all. He lay back on his bunk and crossed his arms behind his head. He stared at the ceiling.
From his pocket, Carlson took a little leather thong. He stooped over and tied it around the old dog's neck. All the men except Candy watched him. Come, boy, come on, boy, he said gently. And he said apologetically to Candy, he won't even feel it. Candy did not move nor answer him. He twisted the thong. Come on, boy, the old dog got slowly and stiffly to his feet and followed the gently pulling leash. Slim said, Carlson. Yeah, you know what to do. What you mean, Slim? Take a shovel, said Slim shortly. Oh, sure, I get you. He led the dog out into the darkness. George followed to the door and shut the door and set the latch gently in its place. Candy lay rigidly on his bed staring at the ceiling. Slim said loudly, one of my lead mules got a bad hoof. Got to get some tar on it. His voice trailed off. It was silent outside. Carlson's footsteps died away. The silence came into the room, and the silence lasted. George struggled. I bet Lenny's right out there in the barn with his pup. He won't want to come in here no more. Now he's got a pup. Slim said, Candy, you can have any of them pups you want. Candy did not answer. The silence fell on the room again. It came out of the night and invaded the room. George said, anybody like to play a little euchre? I'll play out a few with you, said Whit. They took places opposite of each other at the table under the light. But George notched over the cards. He rubbed the edge of the deck nervously, and the little snapping noise drew the eyes of all the men in the room, so he stopped doing it. The silence fell on the room again. A minute passed, and another minute. Candy lay still, staring at the ceiling. Slim gazed at him for a minute and then looked down at his hands. He subdued one hand with the other and held it down. There came a little gnawing sound from under the floor, and all the men looked down toward it gratefully. Only Candy continued to stare at the ceiling. Sounds like there was a rat under there, said George. We ought to get a trap down there. Whit broke out. What the hell's taking him so long? Lay out some cards, but don't you? We ain't going to get no euchre played this way. George brought the cards together tightly and studied the backs of them. The silence was in the room again. A shot sounded in the distance. The men looked quickly at the old man. Every head turned toward him. For a moment he continued to stare at the ceiling. Then he rolled slowly over and faced the wall and lay silent. George shuffled the cards noisily and dealt them. Whit drew a scoring board to him and set the pegs to start. Whit said, I guess you guys really come here to work. What do you mean? George asked. Whit laughed. Well, you come on a Friday. You got 2 days to work till Sunday. I don't see how you figure, said George.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about this for a minute. Basically, we had Carlson get sick of the old dog and said he was going to shoot him, and he took him out with a collar around his neck and took him outside, and he shot and killed him. Now, that was obviously nothing that Candy wanted to happen. In fact, this is plain to see how much in charge Slim is. He looked to Slim for saving his dog, and Slim offered no salvation. And so that is what's going to happen. He's dead now. Can you continue while
Yeah.
Okay.
You may go.
Yeah.
Whit laughed again. You do if you've been around these big ranches much. A guy that wants to look over a ranch comes in Saturday afternoon and gets Saturday night supper and all 3 meals on Sunday, and he can quit Monday morning after breakfast without turning his hand, but you can come to work Friday noon. You got to put in a day and a half no matter how you figure. George looked at him levelly. We're going to stick around a while, he said. Me and Lenny's going to roll up a steak. The door opened quietly and the stable buck put in his head. A lean negro head lined with pain, the eyes patient, Mr. Slim. Slim took his eyes from old Candy. Huh? Oh, hello, Crooks. What's the matter? You told me to warm up tar for the mule's foot. I got it warm. Oh, sure, Crooks. I'll come right out and put it on. I can do it if you want, Mr. Slim. No, I'll come do it myself. He stood up. Crooks, Mr. Slim. Yeah? That big new guy's messing around your pups out in the barn. Well, he ain't doing no harm. I give him one of them pups. Just thought I'd tell you, said Crooks. He's taking them out of the nest and handling them. That won't do them no good. He won't hurt 'em, and Slim, I'll come along with you now. George looked up. If that crazy bastard's fooling around too much, just kick him out, Slim. Slim followed the stable buck out of the room. George dealt, and Whit picked up his cards and examined them. Seen the new kid yet? He asked. What kid? George asked. Why, Curly's new wife. Yeah, I've seen her. Well, ain't she a Lulu? I ain't seen that much of her, said George. Whit laid down his cards impressively. Well, stick around and keep your eyes open. You'll see plenty. She ain't concealing nothing. I never seen nobody like her. She got the eye going all the time on everybody. I bet she even gives the stable buck the eye. I don't know what the hell she wants, George asked casually. Been any trouble since she got here? It was obvious that Whit was not interested in his cards. He laid his hand down and George scooped it in. George laid out his deliberate, solitary hand, 7 cards and 6 on top and 5 on top of those. Whit said, I see what you mean. No, they ain't been nothing yet. Curly's got yellow jackets and his George, but that's all so far. Even every time the guys is around, she shows up. She's looking for Curly, or she thought she left something laying around and she's looking for it. It seems like she can't keep away from guys. And Curly's pants is just crawling with ants, and they ain't nothing come of it yet. George said she wants to make a mess. There's gonna be a bad mess about her. She's jailbait all set on the trigger. That Curly got his work cut out for him. Ranch with a bunch of guys on it and ain't no place for a girl, especially like her.
I think that's the third one.
I think, don't you have to do 3 and 4?
Yeah, I almost like the third one.
Okay, well, you're going to have to wait a minute because I have to read that one too.
Whit said if you got ideas, you ought to come in town with those guys tomorrow night. Why? What's doing? Just the usual thing. We go into old Susie's place. Hell of a nice place. Old Susie's a laugh. Always cracking jokes like she says when we come up on the front porch last Saturday night. Susie opens the door and then she yells over her shoulder, got our coats on, girls? Here comes the sheriff. She never talks dirty neither. Got 5 girls there. What's to set you back? George asked. 2.5. You can get a shot for 2 bits. Susie got a nice chairs to sit in too. If a guy don't want to flop, why, he can just sit in the chairs and have a couple or 3 shots and pass the time of day, and Susie don't give a damn. She ain't rushing guys through and kicking them out if they don't want to flop.
All right, so basically what we have going on here is they are in a whorehouse where they're talking about one and, contemplating going or whatever. The dog has been killed. Lots and lots and lots are going on. They talked about Curly's wife again. The fact that she does not have a name and she is referred to as Curly's wife should obviously draw attention. You should recognize that they are placing very little importance on her life or anything. So let's continue. Might go in and look the joint over, said George. Sure, come along. It's a hell of a lot of fun. Her cracking jokes all the time. Like she says one time, she says, I knew people that if they got a rag run on the floor and a Cupid doll lamp on the phonograph, they think they're running a parlor house. That's Clara's house she's talking about. And Susie says, I know what you boys want. She says, my girls is clean, she says, and there ain't no water in my whiskey, she says. And if you guys want to look at a Cupid doll lamp and take your own chances of getting burned, why, you know where to go. And she says, there's guys walking around here bow-legged because they like to look at a Cupid doll lamp. George asked, Clara runs the other house, huh? Yeah, said Whit. We don't never go there. Clara gets $3 a crack and 35 cents a shot, and she don't crack no jokes. But Susie's place is clean, and she's got nice chairs. Don't let no goo-goos in there either. Me and Lenny's rolling up a steak, said George. I might go in and set and have a shot, but I ain't putting out no 2.5. Well, a guy gotta have some fun sometime, says Whit. The door opened and Lenny and Carlson came in together. Lenny crept to his bunk and sat down, trying not to attract attention. Carlson reached under his bunk and brought out his bag. He didn't look at old Candy, who was still facing the wall. Carlson found a little cleaning rod in the bag and a can of oil. He laid them on his bed and brought them out the pistol, took out the magazine and snapped the loaded shell from the chamber. Then he fell to cleaning the barrel with the little rod. When the ejector snapped, Candy turned over and looked for a moment at the gun before he turned back to the wall again. Carlson said casually, Curly been in yet? No, said Whit. What's eating on Curly? Carlson squinted down the barrel of his gun, looking for his old lady. I seen him going round and round outside. Whit said sarcastically, he spends half his time looking for her, and the rest of the time she's looking for him. Curly burst into the room excitedly. Any of you guys seen my wife? He demanded. She ain't been here, said Whit. Curly looked threateningly about the room. Where the hell's Slim? Went out to the barn, said George. He was going to put some tar on a split hoof. Curly's shoulders dropped and squared. How long ago he'd go? 5, 10 minutes? Curly jumped out the door and banged it after him. Whit stood up. I guess maybe I'd like to see this, he said. Curly's just spoiling her. He wouldn't start for Slim. And Curly's handy, goddamn handy. Got it in finals over in Golden Gloves. He got newspaper clippings about it, he continued. But just the same, he better leave Slim alone. Nobody don't know what Slim can do. Thinks Slim's with his wife, don't he? Said George. Looks like it, said Whit. Of course, Slim ain't. At least I don't think Slim is. But I'd like to see the fuss if it comes off. Come on, let's go. George said, I'm staying right here. I don't want to get mixed up in nothing. Lenny and me got to make a steak. Carlson finished cleaning off the gun and put it in the bag and pushed the bag under his bunk. I guess I'll go out and look her over, he said. Old Candy lay still, and Lenny from his bunk watched George cautiously, my bad. When Whit and Carlson were gone and the door closed after them, George turned to Lenny. What you got on your mind? I ain't done nothing, George. Slim says I better not pet them pups so much for a while. Slim says it ain't good for him, so I come right in. I been good, George. I could have told you that, said George. Well, I wasn't hurting him none. I just had mine in my lap petting it. George said, Did you see Slim in the barn? Sure I did. He told me I better not pet that pup no more. Did you see that girl? You mean Curly's wife? Yeah, did she come into the barn? No, anyways, I never seen her. You never seen Slim talking to her? She ain't been in the barn. Okay, said George. I guess them guys ain't gonna see no fight. If there's fighting, Lenny, you keep out of it. I don't want no fights, said Lenny. He got up from his bunk and sat down at the table across from George. Almost automatically, George shuffled the cards and laid out a solitaire hand. He used a deliberate, thoughtful slowness. Lenny reached for a face card and studied it, and then he turned it upside down and studied it. Both ends the same, he said. George, why is it both ends the same? I don't know, said George. That's just the way they make him. What was Slim doing in the barn when you seen him? Slim? Sure, you said you seen him in the barn and he told you not to pet the pups so much. Oh, yeah, he had a can of tar and a paintbrush. I don't know what for. You sure that girl didn't come in like she come in here today? No, she never come. George sighed. You give me a good whorehouse every time, he said. A guy can go and get drunk and get everything out of his system all at once and no messes. And he knows how much it's going to set him back. These here jail baits is just set on the trigger of the who's grow. Lenny followed his words admiringly and moved his lips a little to keep up. George continued. You remember Andy Cushman, Lenny? Went to grammar school? The one that his old lady used to make hot cakes for the kids, Lenny asked. Yeah, that's the one. You remember anything if there's anything to eat in it? George looked carefully at the solitaire hand. He put an ace up on his scoring rack and piled a 2, 3, 4 diamonds on it. Andy's in San Quentin right now on account of a tart, said George. San Quentin is a prison, BTW. Lenny drummed up on the table with his fingers. George? Huh? George, how long's it going to be till we get that little place and live on the fat of the land and the rabbits? I don't know, said George. We got to get a big steak together. I know of a little place we can get cheap, but they ain't giving it away. Old Candy turned slowly over. His eyes were wide open. He watched George carefully. Lenny said, Tell about that place, George. I told you just last night. Go on, tell again, George. Well, it's 10 acres, said George. It's got a little windmill, got a little shack on it and a chicken run. Got a kitchen, orchard, cherries, apples, peaches, cots, nuts, and a few berries. There's place for alfalfa, plenty water to flood it. There's a pig pen. And rabbits, George. No place for rabbits now, but I could easily build a few hutches, and you could feed alfalfa to the rabbits. Damn right I could, said Lenny. You goddamn right I could. George's hand stopped working with the cards. His voice was growing warmer. And we could have a few pigs, and I could build a smokehouse like the one Grandpa had. And when we kill a pig, we could smoke the bacon and the hams and make sausage and all like that. And when the salmon run up the river, we could catch 100 of them, salt them down or smoke them. We could have them for breakfast. They ain't nothing so nice as smoked salmon. When the fruit come in, we could can it, and tomatoes, they're easy to can. Every Sunday, we'd kill a chicken or a rabbit. Maybe we'd have a cow or a goat, and the cream's so goddamn thick you could cut it with a knife and take it out with a spoon. Lenny watched him with his wide eyes, and old Candy watched him too. Lenny said softly, we could live off the fat of the land. Sure, said George, all kinds of vegetables in the garden. And if we want a little whiskey, we can sell a few eggs or something, or some milk. We just live there. We'd belong there. There wouldn't be no more running round the country and getting fed by a Japanese cook. No, sir. We'd have our own place where we belonged, not sleep in no bunkhouse. Tell about the house, George, Lenny begged. Sure. We'd have a little house and a room to ourselves, little fat iron stove, and a little winter we'd keep up a fire going in it. It ain't enough land, so we'd have to work too hard, maybe 6, 7 hours a day. We wouldn't have to buck no barley 11 hours a day, and when we put in a crop, why, we'd be there to take that crop up. We'd know what come of our planting. And rabbits, Lenny said eagerly, and I'd take care of 'em. How about I do that, George? Sure. You go out in the alfalfa patch, and you'd have a sack. You'd fill up the sack and bring it in and put it in the rabbit cages. They'd nibble, said Lenny, the way they do. I seen 'em. Every 6 weeks or so, George continued, them does would throw a litter, so we'd have plenty of rabbits to eat and sell. And we'd keep a few pigeons to go flying around the windmill like they done when I was a kid. He looked rapidly at the wall over Lenny's head. And it'd be our own, and nobody could can us. If we don't like a guy, we can say, get the hell out. And by God, he's got to. And if a friend come along and we have an extra bunk, well, we'd say, well, why don't you spend the night? And by God, he would. We'd have a setter dog and a couple of striped cats. But you got to watch them cats. Don't get them little rabbits. Oh, Lenny breathed hard. You just let him try to get those rabbits. I'll break their goddamn necks. I'll smash them with a stick. He subsided, grumbling to himself, threatening the future cats, which might dare to disturb the future rabbits.
George sat entranced with his own picture. When Candy spoke, they both jumped as though they had been caught doing something reprehensible. Candy said, you know, where's a place like that? George was on guard immediately. Suppose I do, he said. What's that to you? You don't need to tell me where it's at. It might be any place. Sure, said George. That's right. You couldn't find it in 100 years. Candy went on excitedly. How much do they want for a place like that? George watched him suspiciously. Well, I could get it for $600. The old people that owns it is flat bus, and an old lady needs an operation. Say, what's it to you? You got nothing to do with us, Candy said. I ain't got much good with only one hand. I lost my hand right there in this ranch. That's why they give me a job swamping, and they give me $250 because I lost my hand. And I got 50 more saved up right in the bank right now. That's 300, and I got 50 more coming at the end of the month. Tell you what, he leaned forward eagerly. Suppose I went in with you guys. That's $350 I put in. I ain't much good, but I could cook and tend the chickens and hoe the garden some. How'd that be, George? Half closed his eyes. I got to think about that. We was gonna do it by ourselves. Candy interrupted him. I'd make a will and leave my share to you guys in case I kick off, 'cause I ain't got no relatives nor nothing. You guys got any money? Maybe we could do her right now. George spat on the floor disgustedly. We got $10 between us. Then he said thoughtfully, look, If me and Lenny work on a month and don't spend nothing, we'll have $100. That'd be 450. I bet we could swing her for that. Then you and Lenny could go get her started, and I'd get a job and make up the rest. And you could sell eggs and stuff like that. They fell into a silence. They looked at one another, amazed. This thing they had never really believed it was coming true. George said reverently, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. I bet he could swing her. His eyes were full of wonder. I bet he could swing her. He repeated softly. Kenny sat on the edge of his bunk. He scratched the stump of his wrist nervously. I got hurt 4 years ago, he said. They'll can me pretty soon. Just as soon as I can swamp out no bunkhouses, they'll put on the county. Oh God. Maybe if I give you guys my money, you'll let me hoe in the garden even after I ain't no good at it, and I'll wash dishes and little chicken stuff like that. But I'll be on your own place, and I'll be let to work on our own place. He said miserably. You seen what they done to my dog tonight? They says he wasn't no good to himself nor nobody else. When they can me here, I wish somebody'd shoot me, but they won't do nothing like that. I won't. You have no place to go, and I can't get no more jobs. I'll have $30 more coming. Time you guys is ready to quit.
Okay, so let's talk for a few minutes about what just happened. Basically, they're in the bunkhouse, and they think it's just the two of them, and they're really excited. Here again, Lenny is asking him to tell him about the house that George knows is for sale. Well, Candy had been so silent, laying there in the corner. He was grieving the death of his dog. And Candy rolls over and says, wait a minute. Please let me do this with you guys. I have some money. He ended up getting a settlement from the ranch because that's actually where he lost his hand. And so Candy has some money saved up right now, ready to offer the guys to help buy this house. And so that's the plan. They have a plan. They're going to get this place.
Mm-hmm. George stood up. We'll do her, he said. We'll fix up that little old place, and we'll go live there. He sat down again. They all sat still, all bemused by the beauty of the thing. Each mind was popped into the future when this lovely thing should come about. George said wonderingly, suppose there was a carnival or a circus come to town, or a ball game, or any damn thing. Old Candy nodded in appreciation of the idea. We'd just go to her, George said. We wouldn't ask nobody if they could. Just say, we'll go to her, and we would. We'd just milk the cow and sling some grain to the chickens and go to her. And put some grass to the rabbits. Lenny broke in. I would never forget to feed them. When we gonna do it, George? In 1 month. Right squack in 1 month. Know what I'm gonna do? I'm going to write to them old people that owns that place, and we'll take it. And Candy will send $100 to bind her. Sure will, said Candy. They got a good stove there. Sure got a nice stove. Burns coal and wood. I'm gonna take my pup, said Lenny. I bet by Christ he likes it there. By Jesus. Okay. Voices were approaching from outside. George said quickly, don't tell nobody about it. Just us three and nobody else. They'll liable to can us, so we can't make no mistake. Just go on like we was gonna buck barley the rest of our lives. Then all of a sudden someday we'll go get our own pay and scam out of there. Lenny and Candy nodded, and they were grinning with delight. Don't tell nobody, Lenny said to himself. Candy said, George, huh? I ought to have shot that dog myself, George. I should have ought to let no stranger shoot my dog. Door open. Slim came in, followed by Curly and Carlson and Whit. Slim's hands were black with tar, and he was scowling. Curly hung close to his elbow. Curly said, well, I didn't mean nothing, Slim. I just asked you, Slim said. Well, you've been asking me too often. I'm getting goddamn sick of it. If you can't look after your own goddamn wife, what do you expect me to do about it? You lay off of me. I'm just trying to tell you I didn't mean nothing, said Curly. I just thought you might have saw her. Why didn't you tell her to stay the hell home where she belongs, said Carlson. You let her hang around bunkhouses and pretty soon you're gonna have some pen on your hands and you won't be able to do nothing about it. Curly whirled on Carlson. You keep out of this lest you want to step outside. Carlson laughed. You goddamn punk. He said you tried to throw a scare into Slim and you couldn't make it to stick. Slim threw a scare into me. You're yellow as a frog belly. I don't care if you're the best welter in the country. You come for me and I'll kick your goddamn head off.
All right. So basically, sorry guys, there's a lot going on here. So basically what's happened is we have thanks Leah. Okay.
Definitely got at least 2 wrong, but
Hey, that's not
I
bad.
know I had them memorized before I came in here, but
That's okay. Thank you.
You just pointed and I had to look at that.
Okay. Anywho, basically, here we go again. You know, we've got Curly out there looking for his wife, and he thinks that he was in the barn with Slim, or she was in the barn with Slim, so he runs out to the barn. And, you know, here again, we've got one storyline going with Curly thinking that Slim's with his wife and he's going to go catch him. In the meantime, in the bunkhouse, we have Lenny, George, and Candy, the Swamper, putting together a plan to put some money together to get that house. Well, now everybody is reunited. We're all back in the bunkhouse, okay? Slim is super mad at Curly. He wasn't doing anything with his wife. Curly's fired up and basically attacking everybody. And Lenny and George and Candy are happy because they think in their minds, we have a plan. We're actually going to do this. So let's see how this goes. Candy joined the attack with joy. Glove full of Vaseline, he said disgustedly. Curly glared at him. His eyes slipped on past and lighted on Lenny. And Lenny was smiling with delight at the memory of the ranch. Curly stepped over to Lenny like a terrier. What the hell are you laughing at? Lenny looked blankly at him. Huh? Then Curly's rage exploded. Come on, you big bastard. Get on your feet. No big son of a bitch is going to laugh at me. I'll show you who's yellow. Lenny looked helplessly at George, and then he got up and tried to retreat. Curly was balanced and poised. He slashed at Lenny with his left and then smashed down on his nose with his right. Lenny gave a cry of terror. Blood welled from his nose. George, he cried. Make him let me alone, George. He backed until he was against the wall, and Curly followed, slugging him in the face. Lenny's hands remained at his sides. He was too frightened to defend himself. George was on his feet, yelling, Get him, Lenny! Don't let him do it! Lenny covered his face with huge paws and bleated with terror. He cried, Make him stop, George. And then Curly attacked his stomach and cut off his wind. Slim jumped up. That dirty little rat, he cried. I'll get him myself. George put out his hand and grabbed Slim. Wait a minute, he shouted. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, Get him, Lenny! Lenny took his hands away from his face and looked about for George, and Curly slashed at his eyes. The big face was covered with blood. George yelled again, I said get him! Curly's fist was swinging when Lenny reached for it. The next minute, Curly was flopping like a fish on a line, and his closed fist was lost in Lenny's big hand. George ran down the room. Let him go, Lenny, let go! But Lenny watched in terror the flopping little man whom he held. Blood ran down Lenny's face. One of his eyes was cut and closed. George slapped him in the face again, and still Lenny held on to the closed fist. Curly was white and shrunken now, and his struggling had become weak. He stood, crying, his fist lost in Lenny's paw. George shouted over and over, Let go his hand, Lenny! Let go! Slim, come help me while the guy got any hand left. Suddenly, Lenny let go of his hold. He crouched coweringly against the wall. You told me to, George, he said miserably. Curly sat down on the floor, looking in wonder at his crushed hand. Slim and Carlson bent over him. Then Slim straightened up and regarded Lenny with horror. We got to get him to a doctor, he said. Looks to me like every bone in his hand is bust. I didn't want to, Lenny cried. I didn't want to hurt him. Slim said, Carlson, you get the candy wagon hitched up. We'll take him into Soledad and get him fixed up. Carlson hurried out. Slim turned to the whimpering Lenny. It ain't your fault, he said. This punk sure had it coming to him, but Jesus, he ain't hardly got no hand left. Slim hurried out and in a moment returned with the tin cup of water. He held it to Curly's lips. George said, Slim, will we get canned now? We need the steak. Will Curly's old man can us now? Slim smiled wryly. He knelt down beside Curly. You got your senses in hand enough to listen? He asked. Curly nodded. Well then, listen, Slim went on. I think you got your hand caught in the machine. If you don't tell nobody what happened, we ain't going to. But you just try and get this guy canned, and we'll tell everybody, and then we'll get you you get the laugh. I won't tell, said Curly. He avoided looking at Lenny. Buggy wheels sounded outside. Slim helped Curly up. Come on now. Carlson's going to take you to a doctor. He helped Curly out the door. The sound of the wheels drew away, and in a moment Slim came back into the bunkhouse. He looked at Lenny, still crouched fearfully against the wall. Let's see your hands, he asked. Lenny stuck out his hands. Christ almighty, I hate to have you mad at me. George broke in. Lenny was just scared, he explained. He didn't know what to do. I told you nobody never ought to fight him.
Mom?
No, I guess it was Candy, I told. Candy nodded solemnly. That's just what you done, he said. Right this morning when Curly first lit into your friend, you says, you better not fool with Lenny if he knows what's good for him, and that's just what you says to me.
George turned to Lenny. It ain't your fault, he said. You don't need to be scared no more. You done just what I told you to. Maybe you better go in the washroom and clean up your face. You look like hell. Lenny smiled with his bruised mouth. I didn't want no trouble, he said. He walked toward the door, but just before he came to it, he turned back. George, what do you want? I can still tend the rabbits, George. Sure. You ain't done nothing wrong. I didn't mean to no harm, George. Well, get the hell out and wash your face.
Okay, and that's the conclusion of chapter 3. So a lot went on in this chapter, guys. We have the big fight that came in the end. Basically, Lenny was just sitting there, and he was smiling and having a good time and thinking about his maybe getting that farm with George. And, of course, here comes Curly. He's itching for a fight, and he sees the opportunity and ends up getting his hand smashed by Lenny. So let's see how this works out. We have 3 more chapters left, and vocab for chapter 3. Derision is mocking scorn. Lynch is hanging. Concealing is when you put or keep someone or something out of sight. It's when you hide something. Stride is a long step. Gnawing is persistent or it's chewing. Entranced is a state of fascination. Reprehensible is highly unacceptable. Bemused, confused or puzzled. Cowering, cringing, or moving backwardly, defensively. Regarded, thought carefully about. Wryly in an amusing and ironic way, and solemnly in a humorless or formal way. All right. So if you have any questions, be sure you shoot me an email or send me a private message through Google Classroom. I hope you're paying attention and staying up to date on this, because when we come back, there will be quizzes for each chapter, and there will be a final test. Quite obviously, a very large vocabulary test. So let me know if I can help in any way.
Read chapter 4.